All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Dion's Daily Dose. Today, we have a very interesting person. It is Kurt Earnst. Kurt R. Earnst. No, he is running for LaPorte County Circuit Court Judge. It's quite a mouthful, but it is a very, very important position. We're going to meet him. We're going to talk to him, and we're going to give him an opportunity to tell us not only why we should vote for him, but who the person is behind the campaign. So I'm going to bring him on now.
Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us. Let's see here. Why? I'm trying to figure out why your name isn't popping up. There is a reason for it, and I'm not sure. Wait. Interesting. Well, for some reason, your name isn't showing up, but I can assure you that's who he really is. So
yes, it is. I am here.
Is he here? No. Well, anyway, sorry. Normally, there's a thing that shows under, and oh, there it is. Ta-da! There we go. All right. It's going to say that he's muted. It's because of the way that that I have the audio set up. And yes, I'm going to be looking at him, not at the camera. I'll try to look back occasionally, but I have not forgotten you're there, dear viewer. Believe me. So I can call you Kurt, right?
Please.
Okay. So let's start off with, I guess, who are you? Who's the person behind the name running for office?
Well, again, my name is Kurt Earnst, and I am a candidate for LaPorte Circuit Court Judge. I've lived in LaPorte County since my graduation from law school in 1996.
Okay.
I've been with the same firm, Braje, Nelson & Janes, ever since, doing criminal and civil trial work and litigation for that duration of that time. I became a partner in 2004, which meant that I was involved with, of course, since then for the last 20 years. Hard to believe it's been that long. Involved right. with not only just, doing the lawyer work, but also administrative work, running a business, accounting, personnel, repairs, things of that nature, all the fun things you have when you're self-employed.
Oh, yeah.
I've been a public defender since 1998. In the fall of 2001, I was assigned to the LaPorte Circuit Court as a major felony public defender. Since that time, I've been involved with handling the highest level of felony cases the LaPorte County handles. Oh, that's everything from murder, rape, child molesting, drug cases, burglaries, robberies. I've done many a trial over my years, more than I care to count.
Okay.
So I have a very good working knowledge of how to conduct a trial, the rules of evidence. In fact, in my office, I'm usually the one that people come to and they have a question about evidence, or I even have other attorneys that will call me and say, "Hey, Kurt, I've got this issue. Can you give me some assistance with that?" Because they know my reputation. Matter of fact, back in the early 2000s, when Judge Gilmore was on the bench, they had a conflict where they were going to have to do a jury trial and he wasn't going to be available. He couldn't find anybody. He says, "Hey, Kurt, I've talked to the other lawyers involved and they know you." Said, "If they need to try the case, would you do it?" And actually acts as judge. I said I would. Now I ended up settling, but the fact of the matter is, even back then, they thought enough of my abilities that, that I could handle such a thing even back then, again, in LaPorte Circuit Court.
Yeah.
I've literally been in that court almost every Friday for the last 20 years, involved with cases, trying cases. I'm also do a great deal of federal criminal work in the U.S. District Court. Matter of fact, I was just visiting a client over in South Bend today. I've been doing that for over 20 years now, where I've actually tried cases and litigated cases in U.S. District Court. I've also argued an appellate issue before the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals in Chicago. I've argued before and also litigated or done appellate work in the Indiana Supreme Court. Matter of fact, there was a piece of litigation you may be aware of. It was called the Gunderson case, whereby it was a litigation as to who actually had the right to use the beaches along Lake Michigan, especially on Long Beach.
I remember.
I was involved with that litigation on the side of those who were wanting to say that this was a public right for the public to have a use for that. And I was very honored to have that exposure. And we litigated it at the trial level. I was assistant in that, mainly on the trial level, and assisted in the appeal that went all the way to the Indiana Supreme Court. So I think that I also do a lot of civil litigation. I've done personal injury actions, guardianships, family law, contract disputes, things of that nature. So I think I bring a diversity of experience, both in the criminal matter, which there's a great deal of that in circuit court, but also in the civil matter, which also is a great deal in circuit court as well.
Okay.
And so I've been doing that for quite a while. In my personal life, I believe in giving back to the community. I've been a past judge for the LaPorte County, or the Michigan City rather, teen court program.
Oh, okay.
I'm a founding team member and continue to be a team member as a public defender liaison with the Veterans Court program, which assists veterans that have found themselves in trouble, that have slipped through the cracks. We try to offer them that second chance and get them the resources they perhaps didn't get before. And I've been honored to be a part of that program since its inception.
Okay. I've heard some really, really good things about that program.
You know, especially when I first started, you saw some of these young people that are coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan that were so broken, and they hadn't got the help they needed, and they got into alcoholism or substance abuse or mental health issues, and they'd fallen through the cracks. They got involved with the criminal justice system. Some we couldn't save, but some we could. And so that's a program that I've been involved with for quite some time. I also am a past board member and board president of the Michigan City Boys and Girls Club.
Oh, okay.
I'm married. I live just between Michigan City and LaPorte with my lovely wife of next month 22 years.
Oh,
and
wow.
Our daughter 14.
Congratulations.
Yeah, so I've got a teenager, so that's always a fun thing to have to experience.
Oh, yeah.
And then my biggest thing in public service is I'm a third generation volunteer firefighter and first responder.
Oh, okay.
I've been a member of the Long Beach Volunteer Fire Department for 26 years now.
Wow.
I currently hold the rank of chief. I am the fire chief for the department. I was voted on that by the members when our past chief decided that his time was, he didn't want to do it anymore. He wanted to step back. The membership believed I was the right person to step in that role. But again, my father, where I grew up in West Central Illinois, was a volunteer firefighter and chief.
Okay.
And my grandfather before that. So that was something that I got a chance early on to contribute, and they gave me a chance to serve.
Yeah. And
I've always felt it an honor to be able to do that. And so that's a little bit about kind of who I am and the things that I would hope to bring to the table as the next judge of LaPorte Circuit Court.
Okay. My father-in-law was a volunteer firefighter.
Okay.
Yeah, in Munster area. Okay. So yeah, my wife constantly goes on and on about that. I'm just
we're volunteers proud to serve.
Yeah, absolutely. She puts a lot of man, that's gonna be tough. You might have gained a voter.
Hey, I'll take everyone I can get.
Right. I hear you. Okay, so you're actually the first person, because I've interviewed the other two Republican candidates for the same position, but you're the first person that has brought up the civil aspect of the circuit court.
Right.
Everybody mentions the criminal aspect, but I think the civil aspect is important. What sorts of cases are decided in circuit court in the civil area?
Well, circuit court is one of the courts, Superior One's another, and Superior Two is another, where it's a very common place, especially for a lot of cases that happen in LaPorte, the south part of the county. You'll get personal injury actions, which can be auto accidents. You can be slip and falls, like someone slips at Walmart or something. Not to disparage Walmart, but just as an example.
Yeah.
You have guardianships, people that are in need of someone to look after them as an adult or as children. You've got contract disputes, things of that nature.
Okay.
You have things like eminent domain, which obviously when you have government looking to do improvements and they have to take persons' properties, there's a procedure for that. And sometimes there's litigation involved with that. Circuit court hears things like that as well.
Okay.
Matter of fact, when I first started, this goes back several decades, one of the first cases I was involved with was a class action lawsuit. And we filed that in LaPorte Circuit Court. And I was involved just as an associate in the class action certification procedure, which went all the way to the Supreme Court and actually became the benchmark for class action certifications in Indiana. And that was heard by the circuit court judge then, Judge Robert Gilmore.
Oh, wow.
And this goes back quite a few years ago.
Yeah.
Or you may have things like appeals from Board of Zoning Appeals issues. I mean, obviously, if you lose at the BZA, you have the right to a judicial appeal. Those are things that circuit court might hear as well. They are also involved with, there's a magistrate that is in the circuit court that hears family law matters. That's anything from paternities and divorces and child custody matters and child support issues and visitation issues. Protective orders obviously are a big thing that magistrate hears as well. And there's also a magistrate that's involved with the juvenile justice system and also what's called CHINS, which is children in need of services, that they hear about children that have been taken from the home or things like that. There's a magistrate for that. And those two positions are overseen by the circuit court judge, as is the juvenile detention facility as part of the circuit court's purview of things it's supposed to be responsible for.
Oh, okay.
So you have a lot of things you could be hearing in a day or in a week. And I really think that you have to have a person there that has that diversity of experience that can do a criminal jury trial and then pivot to handle a pretrial motion or a summary judgment motion on a personal injury action. And then next thing you know, you're doing an eminent domain, or you may have to then go into some administrative role and to say, okay, we've got to take care of the juvenile system. We got a new issue there, or grant writing or things of that nature. It's probably the most busy court as far as diversity of functions and needs for administration in LaPorte County.
Wow.
And, obviously Judge Alevizos has been doing this for going on 18 years now. Obviously.
Yeah, I know. It's wild. I remember when he was just a lawyer before, before he was a judge.
I've known Judge Alevizos for a long time. And of course, I was actually there even before that when Judge Gilmer was on the bench. He was there for 2 terms.
Yeah.
And so, again, I have that longevity of experience, that diversity of experience that I think that would be an asset to be the next judge of LaPorte Circuit Court.
Okay. All right. What do you like to do for fun?
Lately, not much, as you can imagine. But I will admit that, again, the between obviously my practice, which takes a lot of my time. It's not a 40-hour week. I mean, matter of fact, that's almost a vacation anytime when you're talking about that.
If you only get 40 hours, right?
The fire department keeps me very busy. Matter of fact, we're just about ready to do a grand opening on a brand new $3.1+ million public safety building.
Okay.
I was also involved because I was chief in procuring a new fire engine, which we're going to take delivery of next year. So I had to work on the specifications for that. Matter of fact, even flew down to Florida with 2 other members at the expense of the manufacturer to go to the plant in Florida where it's being built to go over the final specs and take a tour of the plant.
That's awesome.
And so, those kind of things take a lot of time. Plus, again, when you're a volunteer firefighter, you're never off the clock.
Right.
The pager can go off morning, noon, and night. Matter of fact, next week is the 1-year anniversary of a structure fire we had in Long Beach where I was injured. Actually, because of visibility issues, where I stepped someplace where there wasn't anything where to step.
Oh, wow.
And I actually fractured my foot and my ankle. I was laid up for several months. But again, that's part of being in public service. And again, I'd rather, if it's going to be my fire scene, it's me getting hurt by someone else. But again, those are the kind of things that I do. Other than that, candidly, I'm kind of a homebody. I like just being home with my family and resting and taking advantage of that because, again, you don't get that time back. Yeah. And again, like any parent, you don't spend as much. And of course, when you get a teenager, they don't necessarily want to spend time with you either.
Right.
But, as far as recreation, that's about as far as I get. I'm not a really, go-getter type as far as all these other activities. Between those two things keeps me pretty busy. Okay.
Do you read much?
Not much. No. I mean, when you read all day, when you read all day at night, the last thing you want is more ice cream.
More reading. Yeah. I could see it. Did you used to, like before you got into law?
I did a little bit more. I mean, I always prefer, like things like history, autobiography. I like to hear, like reading like important figures. Like for a long time, I was going through, like Rockefeller or Carnegie, things like that, or J.P. Morgan, the titans of industry, or presidents or political leaders, things of that nature have always kind of fascinated me. Learning about them because there's always something you can learn about their successes. Often came because they had failures, right? And to see how they overcame those things. I remember one of my favorite books was a thing called Baba Black Sheep. I don't know if you remember that show back in the 70s, the Black Sheep Squad, and it was Pappy Boynton was a very colorful person. And he had a quote. It said, "Show me a hero and I'll show you actually a guy that's a bum." And it was just funny how that observation, it was a self-reflection of himself, realizing he was an alcoholic and he had his issues, but by the same token, he was one of the most decorated aces of World War II who they made a show about. Yeah. And so those kind of things fascinate me about the strengths and weaknesses, showing that, hey, this guy was one of the top people in history, but he was a human being as well and had just the weaknesses as well. And I think that humility is important. If you're going to be on the bench, I mean, it's one thing to think, I'm the judge, I'm the big shot. Yes, you are, but you're also a public servant. You're also fallible. Yeah. And so that being fallible, I think you have to have that understanding about the people that come in front of you, that they've got problems too, and don't be quite so judgmental, even though you are judging the case, and to make sure that you treat them in that fashion fairly and civilly. Okay. All right. I like it.
So if elected, will you still be doing volunteer firefighting with Long Beach, or would you give that up? Okay.
No, I would not give it up. And I'll leave to the membership if they felt that perhaps I should step down maybe as chief. I would certainly happily do that. Now again, it's really no different than my practice now. It's not, if I'm in trial, I'm not going to say, hey, there's a structure fire, I have to go. Right. And that's an understanding with any volunteer. It's not like, well, I'm in the middle of a court call, sorry, I have to go. Yeah. But again, I still would like to be able to continue to give back to that community that gave me the chance to volunteer and do something that as a kid, I saw my dad and my grandfather doing that I always wanted to do, and they gave me that opportunity, and I would still want to do that, but they would understand, we understand with everyone that has jobs and lives and families, It's not 24/7. You can always be there. But if I can still contribute, I would want to do that.
Okay, awesome. So do you do you live in Long Beach, or do you live in Michigan City?
It's funny. When I first moved here, when about a year and a half you moved, I lived out in some apartments out by Long Beach, and that's when I joined the department. This is back in 1998.
All right.
And then when I married my lovely bride in 2002, we bought a house over more on the west side of Michigan City. But they say, hey, look, you're still close enough. Your office is close enough. You're going to stay in the apartment. We want to keep you, which I like because I still got to do that. Now, it may take you longer to get there, but on the big ones, I was always there. And during the day from my office, I could get there relatively quickly. In 2012, we moved out off of 400 North, where I live now and still live. And at that time, I went into the present chief. I said, look, I'm moving. I'm going to be farther away. I'm not even going to be anywhere near this place. I said, I'm going to go ahead and just tender my resignation. He says, why? He says, what? Well, you can still be of use. And he got on Google and he showed as far as Google from my old house to there with all the traffic versus where I had now with less traffic. He said, believe it or not, he showed me on Google that it was about the same distance or speed. He said, you're not leaving. And then 6 months later, he made me a captain. Oh, wow. And so I apparently had an ulterior motive. But I mean, it was that idea that I wasn't sure if I would be of service. Yeah. They felt that I was. And I figured, if you're willing to allow me to serve, then I'll continue to serve. Yeah. Okay. And I'm still honored to do that to this day. Awesome. Okay.
So why judge? So I've heard different answers from people who run for judge. It ranges everywhere from, I wanted to do this since I was a kid, to kind of dream job, to next natural step of evolution after you've done, lawyering for a while. And then there are those who really, really want to do it and eventually want to be like Indiana Supreme Court or appellate or something like that. So what's your particular take on
since I was in law school, the idea of being on the bench was always kind of a goal or an aspiration of mine. And again, obviously, I always felt that you had to have a certain number of years gathering knowledge and wisdom and experience before you should even be on a bench, because it's such an important position. Okay. And, one thing, well, why don't you run for this position or that position? I said, for one thing, it has to be the right fit. Okay. It's not like, well, I'm going to challenge a sitting judge when I practice in front of them. I said, that's kind of foolish. I mean, that's a bad business model. Mm-hmm. Or a lot of times I've had a couple of opportunities where I could have been like, I know the person, they're friends. Mm-hmm. And even though, hey, you can beat them, do I really want to? Right. I mean, sometimes you have to take that higher ground, which I have done in the past. There have been times in previous that I've been asked or I could have run and didn't. But being in circuit court for as long as I have and being as intimately involved with it, I've just felt that connection. And so when Judge Alaviso said, I'm not going for another term, I thought it was just like that opportunity opening. Like they say, Yogi Berra says, when opportunity knocks, open the door. Yeah. And the same thing here. I felt that this was kind of a time. I felt that my unique amount of experience being in that court for a couple of decades, my criminal trial experience, my civil trial experience, the things that I've developed in leadership through the fire department, through my volunteer work, and in running a business, I just felt that kind of the stars were starting to align. And I thought, this was an opportunity that if I did take it, I would regret it. And by the same token, it was a new challenge. I'm going to be 54 years old in October. Okay. Now, I'm not over the hill, I don't think. No. But by the same token, the idea of a new chapter, a new challenge, new circumstances is appealing. And so it's kind of a combination of an aspiration, the stars aligning, and the idea of just something new, to take me hopefully into my retirement. Okay. And that, again, another chance to perhaps give back on the things that I've learned and experienced and accumulated to the community that has been my home by choice for almost 30 years. Wow. Okay. So that's one thing that I will say. I mean, you've lived in this area, right? It's Michigan City. I mean, Michigan. People consider Long Beach or Trail Creek or Potawatomi Park or whatever as different areas, but Michigan City is kind of all inclusive until you get to LaPorte. That's its own area. You've lived in Michigan City area, in my opinion, for did you live here before you went to law school or just after law school? I'm from West Central Illinois. That's right. You mentioned that. About 45 minutes northwest of Peoria is where I grew up. Okay. But when I went to Purdue for undergraduate, when I graduated there, I took a year off because I had a mentor of mine who was a college professor that was a lawyer. He says, you know what? He mentored a lot of us for going to law school, and he thought that was good. So I went home, worked my dad's business for a year. Then I applied to law school and went in 1993. I got accepted at Valparaiso, which is a school my mentor talked about. So you can talk about these big schools. That's great. He said, there's a school up there called Valparaiso. He said, you should probably look at that. And for some reason, for me, I don't like big towns. I'm not a big city person.
Okay.
And so the idea of like going to Chicago or other place like that didn't appeal to me. Or I'd been on a big campus. The idea of a small town, which is where I grew up in a town of 3,200 people.
Okay.
Kind of a Westville size town.
Very small. Yeah.
So when I was going through law school, I wanted to be in a small, medium-sized town, small to medium-sized firm where people know each other. It's what I'm comfortable with. You know, I feel like I can go outside, I can walk down the street and I can breathe and I'm not looking over my back or things of that nature. Or I always like to kid people for where I come from. If it's a gunshot, that just means it's deer season. And for me, that was appeal. I remember when I was in law school, there were some people recruiting at the Chicago firms. And I had to walk down. I said, well, are you a third year? You know, we have some free time. Would you like to interview? I said, thank you, but respectfully, no. So why not? I said, I really don't want to work or live in Chicago. And like you said also about, you know, like Supreme Court of Court of Appeals has no interest for me.
Okay.
This is my home. If I'm going to serve, this is where I want to serve. Trial level is where I'm comfortable, where I believe I can serve. The other stuff is good for some people. It's just not a fit for me.
Okay. I really appreciate that. There is a uniqueness that I really love about the Michigan City area in general. And I'm glad there's some people that, you know, appreciate that and are drawn to that, because there are obviously perks to living in a place like Chicago or New York or stuff like that. Otherwise, so many people wouldn't live there. But like you, I tend to be kind of, you guys enjoy that. I'll enjoy my area.
To each their own. Everyone has their own unique interests, and what's good for one isn't good for the other. And my wife is the same way. Like people will say, well, why don't you take your wife into Chicago for the weekend? And I say, because she doesn't want to go to Chicago for the weekend. Neither do I. I mean, sometimes there's things to do for me. I'd rather be out in the country where there's air, where there's space. And, you know, people are genuinely friendly, not genuinely friendly. And frankly, where you feel safe. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing too, is with especially the recent upticks in crime, but like just abhorrent behavior that's apparent in these major cities. I'm so glad that I don't live in them.
Right.
Okay.
But bear in mind though, we still have our fair share of that here. And that's
absolutely.
And that's for the obviously one thing they say, well, you're a defense attorney, so you're going to treat this differently maybe than as a prosecutor would. I said, no. I said, even in my practice now, there are people that I know deserve punishment. There are some that I know that don't. And I tell people, well, you're doing plea agreements. I said, well, where do you think I'm getting those plea agreements from? It takes two to tango, because both seasoned attorneys recognizes the right disposition for this individual. And that's why it's easy to say, well, you know, you approach it from a certain slant. Frankly, I think most lawyers, prosecutors, or defense attorneys look at things objectively. Just we have roles we have to play, and we have to advocate in a certain way. But in the end of the day, some people deserve more harsh justice and some do not. You have to judge the individual.
Okay.
And that's what a judge does. And having that unique diversity of experience gives you the tools to do that.
Okay. I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the questions that I've been asked to ask judicial candidates is, based on your unique experience as an attorney, do you look at it this way or that way? And, you know, you answered that, in my opinion, very well. Because some people kind of spent their whole time in the prosecutor's office. Other people spent their whole time as a defense attorney, some, you know, back and forth. But for the most part, obviously there are outliers, just like with anything else. But I think the majority of attorneys or judges do look at things fairly objectively. That's their job after all.
That's been my experience. I mean, I've tried cases throughout Northwest Indiana, both in state and federal court.
Yeah.
And again, I've been in front of many federal judges, both in the Hammond district and also in the South Bend district, some of which are very well spoken. One of us retired a couple of years ago, Robert Miller, who was legendary. His dad was a judge as well. And he literally wrote the book on evidence. When you go to law school, you see it's, you know, him on evidence. It's him that actually wrote it. I mean, he's just that good. Miller on evidence.
Yeah.
And these are the kind of people that I've had to observe. So I've been in not only just a diversity of one court or even one county where I've been in front of all the judges, but even other counties or even other levels of judicial temperament, shall we say. And again, I know some that were defense attorneys, some were prosecutors, and, you know, people, well, do we need a prosecutor on the bench? I said, we need someone fair and objective on the bench that has that diversity of experience that can say to one person, yeah, this person needs to go away. Another person, Why did this happen?
Mhm.
You know, whether it be issues of mental health or substance abuse,
Okay.
history. I mean, matter of fact, that's one of my kind of pet peeves that I want to try to champion is I think there's a need in this county for a comprehensive mental health program
Okay.
for people that are criminally charged, people that are incarcerated, people that are waiting trial, because I see it a lot in my practice, as is the prosecutors. We both see it.
Well, yeah.
And we have a lot of programs like, for again, Veterans Court or Reentry Court or drug courts, I like to call it. They're all called problem-solving courts. And we have some stuff in circuit court that deal with family law issues and also deal with mental health issues for the children.
Okay.
But the issue is I see a lot of people that I've represented or I see in court that clearly have a mental illness that has segued into self-treatment or self-medicating for substance abuse issues. And we don't have anything here for that.
Right.
Even in the jail, and it's no fault of the sheriff. He's doing what he can, what he has. What my view is that what I would want to bring to the table, again, like being a fire chief, you got to have a plan. I don't care who gets credit for it. We have to have a game plan and a structure to where, why don't we work together to see why don't we have some kind of a comprehensive mental health capability in this county? Or if we have to send people to substance abuse, why do we have to send to South Bend or Maryville? Because a lot of times, let's just face it, these people get out, they're going to run.
Right.
Versus if we had something more comprehensively that we could offer them, even when they're incarcerated, that's that. You talk about caseload management.
Yeah.
That's a big issue because I see a lot of return customers. The judge does, the prosecutor does, I do.
Frequent flyers.
And people say, well, how do you solve that? Well, it's not a magic wand, but I think that's a place we could start with the judges and prosecutors and defense bar and the sheriff's department, the probation department, working together on a comprehensive plan. Like we're going to have a program just over here or a program over here. Let's have a program administered by our judiciary.
Okay.
And go after something. Again, a fist is always better than an open hand.
Right.
And if we go at it with that way comprehensively, there's more funding possibilities.
Yeah.
And who cares who runs it? Who cares who's responsible for it?
Yeah.
It's a need that our society has. It could reduce our caseload. It can make things better for the jail, for our community.
Okay.
And it's just something for me that I would certainly want to champion if I were elected as LaPorte Circuit Court Judge.
Okay. I'm glad you brought that up because that was my next question is if elected, like where's your focus for improvement? And I think you nailed it.
The foundation is there. I mean, Judge Alvisos has done a fantastic job.
Right.
His predecessor did a great job. Judge Gettinger before that. I mean, going back in the 70s with that.
Right.
But, you know, the thing is, though, if you have a good foundation, you have to build upon it.
Yeah.
But you also don't have to be so arrogant thinking, well, I'm going to come in and I'm going to change things because I know better. Judge Baldoni, God bless him, who passed away not long ago, he's the judge of Superior Court number 3, who I started with back in the late 90s. He was the judge of Superior 3 for a long time. And he told me, he says, Kurt, the best advice I can give you is you don't do anything, you have to do anything right away. Get a feel for what you've got.
Yeah.
You might think from the outside you've got all these great plans. Give your predecessor some credit.
Right.
And then build on that because we've got a strong foundation. The question is, how do we take it that next level? And in my view, how do we maybe try to do it where we're not just doing little compartmental programs? Let's work together.
Okay.
Because again, you're stronger as that fist. And I think this county can do that. And again, I know the other judges and they know me. And the thing is, okay, fine, let's have something comprehensively done. That way you get the dollars from downstate and we can help some of these people.
Okay. So yeah, that was I guess my next kind of question is where does the money come from for these programs and other candidates, and not just candidates, but for judge, but candidates for other offices. Mentioned grants from downstate. But there's
Circuit Court has a very good check writer now, a grant writer.
Okay.
He's a good man. Now, how much longer he's going to keep working, we don't know, but we have that foundation. And again, in my travels talking with our state senator, our state representative, we've got 2 large hospitals in this county, big corporations. All right. They're not broke. And we have a third, technically, if you add Beacon, which is South Bend Memorial. Reach out, collaborate.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm not going to say that's going to be overnight, but at least try, make some efforts, make some inroads. It's better than not doing anything at all. Okay. And go, so I say, I'm not going to say that I have a grand plan. I know how to fund it and everything. I don't. Yeah. It's just something where I see there's a need and at least there deserves the effort of trying to do something. But again, doing it collaboratively, doing it comprehensively and not piecemeal. Okay. No, that's really good. I'm glad that at least you acknowledge that I don't have everything all worked out right now, because that's really important to me as a voter. When I look at people, if they can admit I don't have all the answers,
that goes a long way because it shows honesty. It shows like some of the, you've seen the politicians,
Sure.
and just because you're running for judge doesn't mean you're a politician.
No, I am not.
Yeah. So I want to make that clear.
And frankly, if I had all the answers, it probably would be done.
There you go.
Exactly. It's identifying a need and a willingness to work towards the goal.
Right.
Which is all you can ever aspire to do.
Yeah.
Is to try to be better each day.
Fair enough. So there has been a lot of talk lately about I forget what it's called. I was sent the exact name of it, but I don't remember. But it's essentially the juvenile diversion program.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be kind of a focus for your competitors on that.
Right.
But you're saying a little bit broader approach and kind of bring, that, but with other stuff to kind of get it, the root cause behind the reason.
Absolutely.
For the criminal.
And again, it's just like anything else. From a great tree comes from a small acorn.
Okay.
Starting with the children things, and I agree with my competitors on this, is that's a good program. The juvenile system, which we oversee as LaPorte Circuit Court Judge, it's critical. This is that opportunity to get to these children, whether they be in a child in need of services situation or a delinquency situation.
Okay.
Having those possibilities where we're not necessarily seeing them destroy their lives at a young age, where we can identify factors like mental illness or substance abuse or abusive home issues, which of course we know. I mean, we like to think this is all beaver cleaver. It isn't.
No,
it's not a perfect world and never will be. But what things can we do to try to make it better? There's only so much government can do in these kind of things. And I agree that needs to continue to be expanded upon. But then I see that I said, that's not the only need. How do we expand this then?
Right.
And maybe not necessarily in the same program, but how do we say, okay, we're helping this group, just like the drug court program is a wonderful program ran by Judge Friedman and also by Judge Elavizos.
Okay.
And it's been helpful, but there's only so many people they can take.
Right.
There are certain parameters to where they have to say, yeah, you've got a drug problem, but you don't really fit our needs or our things, so you can't be in it. What do we do with them?
Yeah.
My view is I don't want to see the Titanic going down. There's no life rafts. I want everybody to have the possibility of that life raft.
Okay.
And I think that's where we need to focus our efforts. Like, keep the ones that we've got going and strong and feed that. But where are we still deficient? How do we identify that? Not say, well, I've worn the pin. I care. We've done this one program. I'm done.
Right.
The work never ends.
Okay.
How do we find another way to help people that are being through the cracks? If they're not veterans, if they're not juveniles, if they're not in a major substance abuse issue. And again, mental health. I mean, it touches all facets of our life. It could be older people, younger people. And again, I want to make sure that all of them have that chance, because again, that can only help the community. It can also help the individual, and it can reduce caseloads, jail populations.
Right.
It just, why not at least try that next level? If you fail, you can at least say you tried. But
Absolutely.
Again, I agree. What we do in juvenile court is incredibly important, because it's that one rare opportunity, like I said, to keep them from coming in front of me.
Yeah.
Or my two counterparts who are in major felony courts. We don't want to have to get to that point. I've represented people that have waived as juveniles to court. I have a gentleman right now I'm representing in another county. He's charged with attempted murder. He wasn't even 18 yet.
Wow.
I mean, and again, unfortunately, things fail. But again, you have to step in and do that. But the question is, what things can we put in place that maybe had that been in place, he wouldn't have been in that situation?
It's a great question. And one of the things that I've learned, because I worked at Indiana State Prison for a while, a lot of the people that you see in the criminal justice system, it's very easy for an outsider, for people who, and I say outsider, regular civilians, people who don't have the direct access or direct knowledge of our criminal justice system. I'm a firm believer in imperfect, but better than anywhere else for our criminal justice system. Right. It's not perfect. There's room for improvement. I'm glad that everyone I've talked to has ideas about how to improve it, yourself included. But you mentioned plea agreements, and the fact is, number one, the vast overwhelming majority of cases end up, either not going forward or in a plea agreement. Very few end up in actual trials.
Right. And that's when we have to do what we do.
Right.
Again, like people say, well, do you actually try a lot of cases? Yes, I do. And again, on the defense side, sometimes you're trying them because you have no other option.
Yeah.
Or your client is clearly dug their heels in that they believe themselves to be innocent. And if you, I like to tell people, how do you represent a guilty person? I said, that's simple. Represent someone you know is innocent.
Yeah.
You want to talk about not sleeping at night.
Right.
And again, I've been involved with cases where you've heard those words, not guilty. And I'm like, that's the right decision.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard cases guilty. That was the right decision too.
Yeah.
We have to have faith in, it's not a perfect system, but it's a better system than any human being has ever designed.
Exactly.
And let it run its course.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you have to trust that system and operate within it. And again, advocate as you must.
Yeah.
And again, that's all of us. Like I said, at the end of the day, we're going to fight like, you know what, for our people,
yeah,
or our side of the equation. But at the end of the day, you shake hands. It's not personal. We did our job, and we go back and do something the next day.
Yeah.
And that's the way it should be. And that's why I like about this election is that even if it wasn't required by the judicial canons of ethics to be non-confrontational,
right,
we wouldn't do it anyway.
Yeah, there are. And for those of you not aware, maybe you haven't watched the other interviews. Judges have judge candidates have a very different set of rules that they have to follow. There are certain fundraising. We here in Indiana have what's called a partisan election, which means you announce your party and run as that. There are some states that, like school board here in Indiana, party is, quote, irrelevant. They don't name their party. There's no primary. It's just a regular general election and people run. There are certain sets of rules for judge candidates to where, like you said, there are certain behavioral concerns. You can't make certain statements about your opponent. You can't do certain things, and things that, although this is a very minor part of a larger set of rules, like you can't discuss like how you're going to rule on things or say, you know, I particularly hate this type of person, and if they come in front of me, I'm going to make sure I throw the book at them. You can't do stuff like that. It's just not, it's just so the viewers understand, you know. Okay, so let's see. There was something that I wanted to, I'm sorry. I wanted to make sure I explain that because it's important, because a lot of times I ask different questions for judicial candidates because of that, because I can't be like, how do you see this? But, what do you think is the best thing and this is going to come from a slightly different angle than I usually ask. What do you think the best part of LaPorte County's judicial system is?
Well, I like that, we have courts that have kind of defined roles. Circuit Court and Superior 1 will generally hear the higher felony cases, kind of split between the county relatively equally. And then you add Superior Court number 2 that has a great deal of family law and, of course, civil litigation as well. And then we have 2 courts, Superior 3 and Superior 4. Superior 3 is in LaPorte. Superior 4 is in Michigan City, where they hear mainly things like misdemeanors and small claims and things of that nature. Now, Superior 3 used to hear that until their caseload got too big. And that's why Circuit Court, way back, again, I remember it though, they took over the level 6 felonies. The level 6 felonies used to be in Superior 3, just like they are in Superior 4. So we have that kind of a diverse, kind of a splitting of the workload, as it were. All the judges that, obviously that I appear in front of, that they're knowledgeable about what they do. I've worked with them all before they were lawyers, or before they were judges, rather. And I think there's that level. We're a small enough community. There's enough cordial relationships that we can build upon that, versus you get a bigger place where there are just so many of them, they can't possibly really know each other. Or sometimes you get the factions or the fighting and things of that nature, which drive me nuts. I've never understood that, whether it be in law or like in firefighting or volunteer work. I said, look, we've got a similar goal. We need to work on that. The county has been very supportive of the judiciary over the years. Obviously, we've remodeled the courthouse over in Michigan City, which obviously was in great need of repair. And I know now they're going to start focusing on LaPorte Circuit Court that has some similar needs. Of course, they're a little hamstrung because of that unfortunate incident with the water break at the county complex a couple of years ago. They're still trying to rebound from that a little bit. But having that kind of a community, it's small enough to where people know each other, and it's not big enough that it just dilutes it to where you don't really know people, or there's too much of the infighting to where you can't get anything done. And so that's what I kind of like about it. And that's why, again, I go to some of these bigger counties. I'm like, if I went down to Marion County, I'd be like, this is ridiculous. I mean, or like I go to Lake County one time, I had to go to a juvenile matter, and they have just a separate juvenile hall just for their, you just literally go down this room and there's courtrooms left and right. You just keep going down the corner. There's nothing but courtrooms.
And it's all for juvenile?
All for juvenile type things, because it's such a large county with such a heavy caseload. And I'm like, and I know a few of the judges over there that are classmates of mine, and I'm like, I don't know how you do it. Here, I like the idea. It's a courtroom, a courthouse. You know the people, and you develop that intimacy that I think makes you more productive. And I think it makes a better work environment. Great.
I agree. I like, it's one of the reasons why I like LaPorte County in and of itself, but Michigan City especially. So what drew you to law? As it did you want to be a lawyer since you were a kid?
You know, it's funny you say that. My mom showed this to me a couple of years ago. I was like in third grade, and they're talking about what you want to do. And of course, my father's family business was HVAC, electrical wiring, plumbing. Heating.
All right.
I would have been third generation if I wasn't all thumbs.
Yeah.
And he recognized very early on that I did not have that ability. I didn't.
Not your thing.
That gene did not pass me in third generation, even though I did it for several years in summers and things.
Oh, did you?
That.
Okay.
In between all through in college, and then in between law school and college, I did it with my father as well. But it just wasn't clearly for me. And he could sense the business and the area that we grew up in wasn't conducive to another generation, and he wanted me to do something. But in third grade, I had a little stick figures. I either want to be an electrician or a lawyer. And it was even back then. And then when I got into high school, my dad still had this dream that I'd be an engineer.
Okay.
Which is kind of somewhat of his background to an extension. But I was not the greatest in math. And one of my math teachers told me, he says, Kurt, you know, this engineer thing's going to work, but you know what, the way you argue about every grade I give you, you'd be a great lawyer. And so I thought, you know what, a little light bulb went on there. And I just always felt that was something that I always felt I had the ability to speak. I was not afraid to speak publicly. I felt comfortable doing it. I certainly wasn't afraid to voice my opinion or to advocate. And so it just seemed like a natural fit. And frankly, I don't regret it.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Well, that leads to my next question, which is, what is your favorite thing about, I guess, being a lawyer or practicing law?
You know, especially what I do, where I do a little bit of everything. I'm not just pigeonholed into one area per se, but you know, especially having done this for a couple of years or a couple of decades now, obviously, is that you'll be out in the community. Like the other day, I was out giving out signs. I was out there, just pulled over somewhere. I was next to a gas station. I heard this guy, "Hey, Mr. Earnst." He waved me down and says, "Hey, you remember me?" And it was a guy I'd represented years ago. He says, "I just want you to tell you, you really helped me out. You kind of saved me from something horrible." He says, "Give me one of those signs."
Awesome.
And again, or like we'll be out at a restaurant or something. Sometimes it drives my wife nuts. She's kind of private that way, but like a cook, I'll be like, "Hey, Mr. Earnst, how you doing?" And again, those are those rewarding moments. You don't get a lot of them because you get just you. They call you every name in the book because they think you're the enemy,
right? Or you're the reason that you know they're obviously guilty and got sentenced. You know, got found guilty and sentenced, but because you were their lawyer, it's your fault.
But just having those moments, and they don't happen often, but you get enough of them here and there where you feel like I really helped this person. They were genuinely grateful for it. You know what? I did that. And again, that's what I say about laws. Unfortunately, it's not like you're a carpenter and at the end of the day, you see this house you built.
Yeah.
Or you're a plumber. You came in, the plumbing was horrible, and now it's perfect. In law, you don't always necessarily get that feedback or that good feel, but every once in a while you do. And again, that's the kind of thing that keeps you going. It's not easy because there's a lot of days you're like, God, do I have to do this again today? Because again, like people know the kind of work that I've done, and I've represented some people that were very, very unsavory over the last couple of decades.
It happens.
But at the end of the day, they're entitled to representation. Our Constitution is there. I had to read a book in college. It's called Gideon's Trumpet.
Okay. It
was about Clarence Earl Gideon. He was a person in the 60s that was arrested in Florida for stealing, and he was tried without a lawyer. And he kept asserting, I have a right to a lawyer. Back then, in state court, you did not have a right to a lawyer.
Really?
That was deemed to be a federal right in the federal Constitution, but not a state right.
Interesting.
He challenged that case all the way to the Supreme Court, where ironically, at the Supreme Court, he was given a free lawyer because at the Supreme Court level, you're entitled to a pauper lawyer, as they call him, or in essence, a public defender.
Yeah.
And it was that case, Gideon v. Wainwright in the 60s. This is the same time frame as Miranda and some of those other types of laws that established that the 14th Amendment said that the states also had an obligation under the 6th Amendment to right to counsel.
Interesting.
And that was a book that one of my mentors in college had us all read, and it made a difference on me. And when I first started my career, I was just sitting second chair as a greenhorn.
Yeah.
And it was a gentleman that had been going around at gas station or rest areas and knocking people unconscious and robbing them. One of them died.
Ooh.
I knew it was pretty serious stuff, and I was sitting second chair.
Mhm.
And I remember this senior lawyer that I was learning from, he says, Kurt, the important thing you know is this. If this guy gets convicted, but we gave him a fair trial, we can sleep at night. But if he's convicted and we didn't do our job and give him a fair trial, you shouldn't like that. You should not sleep well at night. And I've carried that with me ever since, is that idea that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what side of the equation you're on, we're doing a job that a system requires, that it only works if both sides do that.
Right.
Because I actually interned as a prosecutor. That's what I had hoped to be when I graduated law school. But when the jobs came out, the job that I ended up taking was with Craig Braje and Bill Nelson here in town.
Yeah.
And I remember I went to my mentor, one of my mentors who was a prosecutor back home where I grew up. He says, you should take the job. And I was surprised to hear him say that. I said, well, I said, hey, you got to have people on both sides or this system doesn't work. And again, that stuck with me. He says, you should do that. He said, that's where you want to do it. Just because it's not a prosecutor job, don't feel like you can't do it. We need good people. He said, people have to keep me in check. And only with good lawyers on both sides of the equation does the system work.
Wow.
And those kind of things, again, like, you know, that book and that professor or that prosecutor that I learned from, I've carried that with me. So people said, Kurt, why aren't you a prosecutor? I said, I could be.
Yeah.
I said, it just wasn't the path that was set for me. But at the end of the day, I'm still part of that same process that keeps this country going, for better or for worse.
Right. Absolutely. So one of the things that I've noticed, and I think other people too have noticed, and I understand you may be limited as to what you can say, but I want to bring up some things, especially recently with Trump's legal troubles. We sometimes see the state having a massive amount of power. And then if you have a judge who is, for example, a lot of people will say, you know, a Democrat judge or a liberal judge or a progressive or a certain term. But my opinion being a judge that doesn't use their judicial power to challenge the state's authority in a proper way, in my opinion. There's a lot of this is opinion, so bear with me. We end up with a situation where the state is able to abuse an otherwise, like we said, imperfect, but better than anywhere else system.
Right.
Do you see, and obviously Trump's on what's on the front page, but do you see a system? Do you see a system plagued with those issues, or do you see a system that, yeah, we're going to have issues here and there, but in general, it's pretty fair?
You know, it's funny you say that. You know, again, I've practiced law throughout this entire area. I've been in federal court with judges that are appointed by Republicans or Democrats. And for the most part, I've never seen it directly myself.
Okay, that's good to hear.
I think my issue is you get these high-profile cases that the lawyers, regrettably, and I think to an extent the judiciary as well, because they're in that light, they act differently. A perfect example, when I was in law school, was during the O.J. Simpson criminal trial.
Oh, yeah, that was
And I remember watching that, even then, disappointed in all the theatrics. And a lot of it, I have to believe, I mean, I'm speculating, was because the camera was on.
Yes.
And I'll never forget, we were taking a poll. I was in a ethics class in my third year, and they were about to announce the verdict. And I was one of the only a few people that said it was going to be not guilty.
Really?
And they said, you think he's innocent? I said, no.
That's not what I said.
I said, they blew the case. And I guess I had issues with the idea of there being that idea that because it's a high profile case that we need to treat it differently.
Okay.
And I know I've been, again, especially like in federal court, especially and also state court, it's important that a judge maintains control of the courtroom, that no lawyer on either side of the equation is allowed to go off the reservation. That's your courtroom. You are charged with an obligation to instill justice, to make sure the rules are followed.
Okay.
Now, if they do things pursuant to the rules,
yeah,
great. If they want to get out of line and make this a circus, that's not happening. And that should not happen.
Okay.
And that's as far, I think, as a judge should go, as far as saying, well, I'm going to do this to the state because I think that they have too much power, or I feel sorry for the defense over here. We're supposed to be, and we are charged with being detached and independent magistrates.
Right.
That's the oath that we take, and that's the job we function. We're not advocates. We can't be. If we do, the system fails. We need to make sure that there is as even a playing field as the law provides, or it should be. But again, maintaining that everyone is cordial, everyone is civil, they follow the law, and they don't get out of line. If they do, you put them in line very quickly.
Okay.
And I think that if you do that, and again, I know judges that I've been in front of that have that reputation, you know better than to speak up, because you know what's going to happen next, and it's not pleasant. And I think that's a critical role of the judge, to have that experience and that ability to say, no, that's not appropriate. And I've been in trials where the other side has gotten out of line with the judge's scolding, saying that's inappropriate. During even a jury trial one time years ago. And he said, that's inappropriate. You will apologize to opposing counsel, and then you will reserve your questioning.
Wow.
And again, that kind of ability of leadership and control and experience is critical. But as far as advocating, really no judge, I think, should do that, because I think it's when you get in trouble, because if nothing else, there's another level of appellate review that's going to say, there's a problem here. And no judge wants to try a case twice. I think it's better to do it right the first time than to try it over again. And I think if you set that example early on in your career, when you're on the bench or as a lawyer or anything else, there's a level of respect. You don't see that because they know better than to not do that. And then I think you get a better disposition of justice.
Okay. All right. I only got a couple more questions. We're almost out of time. So there are, and because we have a partisan election system here in Indiana, where you announce your party, a lot of people, especially in LaPorte County, Michigan City, in general, they don't really seem to care, or if they do, they lean left. But the county itself is very conservative. Our elections, we tend to choose Republicans. In many cases, the primary decides the election for some positions. I think it's less important for judges than others, but I'm kind of glad personally that we have this system in Indiana. One of the concerns, especially with the very public Trump trials and other things that are going on, is the worry that a Democrat or a progressive or someone else is going to get into office and then completely undo everything that some of the judges have worked so hard to do here in Indiana. Alvizos being one of them. Like I said, I remember when he was actually my lawyer a long, long time ago. Actually my ex-wife's attorney. But anyway, he was really short and he was really cool. And I really enjoyed him as an attorney. And then I think he did a great job as judge personally. But there's concern and worry, and I've had a lot of people blowing up my inbox and my messages with, hey, make sure this and double check that. So what does being a Republican mean to you, running as a Republican? And more importantly, do you think it matters?
I don't know that it necessarily matters. I don't think that it defines you as a person.
Okay.
Again, my entire upbringing has been as a Republican. And again, I think that's where I think a lot of my core values might gravitate. But again, I've been in front of judges that are Democrats, judges that are Republican, both in the federal and state level. And when you go in the courtroom, you walk out, you wouldn't know anything other than they just did their job. I mean, especially at the federal level, where they're judicial appointments. I mean, it doesn't get more political than that. Right. And some might be harsher than others. That's true. But as a general rule, I don't really see it. I look at it as you have to run in something that fits your values per se, but at the end of the day, say, I'm a Republican, therefore this is going to happen. Right. That's not what the oath you take says. Okay. The oath is saying, you're a Republican, you're going to do this, this, and this. Yeah. I mean, politically, has it been closer to who I would probably identify with? Mm-hmm. But does that mean I agree with everything that party stands for? Of course not. Because what was it? I think I can't remember which politician it was. It might have been during the Depression. He said that if you agree with me 100%, there's something wrong with you. Right. Right. There should be disagreement. Mm-hmm. I think that's the one thing that I am disappointed about our discourse these days, that we can't have disagreements. It's like, thank you. Hey, we can agree to disagree, but not be disagreeable. Right. And that's why, again, we have our rules that prevent us from being as partisan as we could be. Yeah. There are certain counties where it's completely, if they're all appointed, the judges are appointed. Or there's a couple of counties, I think, where there is no party affiliation. Yeah. Indiana has weird. Yeah. They have a lot of different ways of doing it. But again, this is a system we have here to where we let the voters decide. Mm-hmm. I'm comfortable with that. Yeah. And again, I decided to run as a Republican. There are 3 of us running. There's no Democrat running at this time. And again, all we can do is that, hey, this is who I am as a person.
Right.
And that's why it's important things like this where we get a chance to speak more than 1 or 2 minutes, which we appreciate.
Right.
Lets people know, hey, there's a person there, not just an R, a D, an I, or whatever.
Yes. And
it's important to know who that person is and what their experience and their life teachings are to know who's going to be on that bench. I think that goes more to it than anything else, in my opinion.
Okay. All right. Phenomenal. Who is, I don't know if I would call it like a role model, but who's your favorite Supreme Court justice?
Right now, I would probably say Chief Justice Roberts.
Roberts.
Yes.
Interesting. Why?
Well, obviously he has ties to Northwest Indiana. He grew up in Long Beach. I didn't know him myself. He went to Law School. Ironically, one of the other justices, Amy Coney Barrett, I knew her husband very well. He was an assistant United States attorney in South Bend, and so I dealt with him for years. I'd never met her, but I knew him very well. And I had to watch him over her shoulder during some of her confirmation debates, clearly biting his tongue.
Yeah.
Not like somebody, she handled it with his grace.
It was insane.
It was, but
the whole thing.
The thing I like, I mean, I like him, or like obviously in previous generations, think people like Sandra Day O'Connor or Rehnquist that didn't believe in being overly, judicial intervention or being overly that, but also looking for consensus, looking for how is the court perceived and how are these laws perceived over time.
Okay.
Which I think is important versus saying, well, I'm going to come in office and immediately I want to see this gone. Right. Versus having, again, more of a deliberative and collaborative effort.
Okay.
I mean, I met Sandra Day O'Connor when I was in law school.
Oh, wow.
Even though she was starting to have some issues with her hands were heavy, but was still even then sharp as a tack. Yeah. I met Justice Antonin Scalia. Matter of fact, I have a picture with him because he came to speak at Valparaiso, and because I was on a moot court board. He met with us privately. I have a picture of me, just a few people with him. And he actually reminds you a lot of Alaviz in a lot of ways, very jovial, very personable, very cerebral. And he was, I mean, this guy, the man was brilliant.
That's what I've heard.
And he was the ultimate jokester. I mean, think about this. As conservative as he was, when he was confirmed, only like 2 or 3 people voted against him. Imagine that today's world. Right. Because he was so qualified and so charming and so collegial that he was able to do that. But again, I guess I like those figures that they're maybe a center right would be a way of talking about, but the idea is that not too far one way or the other, which is where I think a judge really should be. Okay. Is in the center because that's because again,
direct interpretation of the law.
Exactly. Because you really shouldn't come in with an axe to grind because then you're not upholding your oath.
Okay. All right. Interesting take. Yeah. All right. I will endeavor to learn more. I personally don't have a very high opinion of Judge Roberts, Chief Justice Roberts, but, and I want to make sure I clarify here, that's because of my personal interpretation of the various rulings that he's done. That's why when you said it, I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Is it just because local? But that's an interesting take. Like I said, I'll have to look more.
The Supreme Court has a history of judges that they were appointed by. You look, one of the biggest liberal icons in judicial history was Brennan. He was an Eisenhower appointee. Yeah. Warren was an Eisenhower appointee. I mean, in essence, people we associate with being more on the liberal side, they're Republican appointees. Yeah. Blackmun, who actually wrote Roe v. Wade, was appointed by Nixon.
Interesting.
And then Byron White, who was one of the dissenters, Kennedy. And so you have those diversities where, it's one thing where maybe they came from politically, they got to the bench, they morphed into something else, maybe because of necessity or because they felt that was the right thing to do. And again, I think as a judge, at the end of the day, you take your personal experiences, your wisdom, and your past years of experience, and you try to do the best you can to dispense justice without an agenda, because I don't think you should have an agenda, because otherwise you're not upholding the oath. And I take oaths very seriously. If you say I'm going to uphold the Constitution and the laws, then you do that regardless of maybe your personal affliction. There's plenty of other appellate courts that can do that for you if they feel it's necessary. Or we have this thing called the legislature. Okay. That's where a lot of laws are supposed to be made. When you're at trial level, that's why I don't have no aspirations farther than that. I don't want to get into all the policy making issues. The idea is the law is here, we apply it. If you believe the law is wrong, you have the right to an appeal. That's the genius of our system. Okay. It's designed to be imperfect. It's designed that things might get wrong, and how do we fix it at another level? Okay. And again, you don't want to have this well, I'm never wrong, I'm the judge. Nonsense. all you can do is the best you can. And again, if for some reason on that rare occasion you get it wrong, you have an appellate court saying you got it wrong. I've never been in federal court in front of Judge Sharp, was one of the most legendary judges in this entire district. And he said, well, Mr. Earnst, I agree with you, but just last week, the Indiana Court of Appeals or the Seventh Circuit said I was wrong, so I got to disagree with you, but I want to agree with you. I said, well, thank you, Judge. He said, well, apparently they thought I was wrong, and he said, I guess I got to deal with that.
Yeah.
And I said, well, thank you, Judge, and we moved on.
Yeah.
And again, he wasn't having his feelings hurt. It's just, hey, if they saw it differently, so be it.
Fair enough.
We're all humans.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, we're right at 1 hour. So, kind of wrap it up. What would, first of all, before I go any further, if people want to learn more about you, is there a website or a Facebook?
I have a Facebook,
okay.
Earnst for Judge.
Okay.
Obviously, I'm trying to put more content on there as much as I can. It's kind of new. I just got it started up about a week or so ago.
Okay.
I'm going to start trying to put more content on there because I understand that social media is important. But for me, the most part is that, I want to try to meet the people one-on-one. I try to be able to talk to them as people. Social media has its place, and places like this are wonderful, but I still believe in the old school of retail and meeting people, knocking on the doors to an extent, or meeting with them in a coffee shop or something. They see my T-shirt or there's something they want to talk to me. I'm always available.
Is this the right page?
It is.
Okay.
There's actually no, it says Kurt Earnst for Judge. It should be ignored. It should be Earnst for Judge.
Okay. Good to know.
Words.
Good to know.
Just Ernst like my sign, Earnst for Judge. Keep it simple.
Okay. I'm going to actually share this with you. I try to do this for everyone so that people understand they can get accurate information and go to the right place. So all I did was I went to Facebook. I typed in Earnst for Judge, just like you said, and that's not what I wanted to do. And it appears as a group, public group, not a page. I don't know if that.
Matters. I'm not the most tech savvy. I'm trying to get
that's fine. That's okay.
There you go.
Yeah, just so you know, though, it appears as a public group. So you click on it, and then here it is. But it's public, so anybody can see who's in the group and what they post. You can post anything.
Yep.
Yeah. So
as it should be.
Yeah. And I will say I really, really appreciate that, because I am a very, very vocal advocate for free speech, and I detest censorship. I think it's the sign of tyranny, and unfortunately we're seeing it more and more and more.
Well, the problem is you can't have a society where you suppress ideas
just
because you don't like them. By definition, someone has a different opinion, you don't like it. And again, I guess ironically, we've come from the liberal thought of thinking has kind of come full circle. The idea is that the only way to defeat speech is with more speech.
Right. Or
as judges or famous historians would say, you don't know who the outliers are until you allow them to speak and know what they have to say.
Right. And I think that right there is a commonly misunderstood but core tenet of civilized society, which is the only way if someone's crazy, for example, or if someone's extreme, or if someone wants to hurt puppies, is if you let them talk. Right. Because you don't know what's in someone's mind. But if you actually sit down and have a conversation with them and they talk about all the delicious things that are the delicious ways that they prepare puppies, then all of a sudden you go, okay, yeah, they got an issue.
Yeah. Our founders, were human beings like anyone else. When you look at what they were able to do, which we probably could not replicate today if we were to try, and the foresight that they thought that there were certain enumerated rights that had to be written down, had to be expressly said, that were sacrosanct. Free speech being obviously, again, the First Amendment, one of the first things they thought about.
Right.
Obviously, they were taken from the Virginia Bill of Rights and incorporated as well. But it was something where they recognized all those eons ago was critical to a good and proper democracy.
Right.
And it's only if we maintain that, again, just like in a court proceeding, everyone deserves a right to be heard. Now, at some point, you may have to stop if it's nonsense or if it gets off the reservation. Right. But at the end of the day, you have to be civil. People have the right to be heard. That's what our system is based upon. And if we get away from that, we get away from what made our country great.
Awesome. So Earnst for Judge. To find out more about you, is there any website or anything
no website,
else?
Just that. I'm trying to keep it simple.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Thank you very much for being on the show. I greatly appreciate it. And I think that probably is the best place for people to start. Go to Facebook, Earnst for Judge. No other social media accounts or anything? Okay.
Just look for me, look for my signs, and obviously look for me on the ballot, and I hope to have your support to be your next judge, LaPorte Circuit Court.
Okay, phenomenal. Thank you very much. Again, I really, really appreciate you being here. Good luck.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right. Kurt Earnst, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry, Kurt R. Earnst. No, it doesn't matter, but I think he's right. It does add the whole middle initial thing. That's why my grandfather, when I was a kid, he used to say, always use your middle initial. Always use your middle initial. It comes off as more, what did he say? More professional, more legal. It's funny because my grandfather so bad really wanted me to be a lawyer. He felt that my arguing, I think, like he said, arguing with him all the time. But you said, anyway, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining me this evening. Wife and I will be doing a review where we put together all of our thoughts about the various candidates and who we like. I'm going to say this, it's going to be tough because I like all three, but there are definitely some things that some of them have said. I really like the free speech thing, just saying. Not a huge fan of Roberts, but I'm going to look into them. I got to give it. So we'll see. We'll touch on that another time. Thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate that you spent your time checking this out. Let's see here. Sunday, Sean, again, 7 p.m. Tomorrow night is Lincoln Day dinner for the Republican Party. I will report to you from there. And kind of for those of you who have never been, it's cool. It's a nice formal event. And it's actually one of the few ways that the party has to raise money for candidates. That's the point, to get good candidates elected. So I'll see you tomorrow night. I probably won't do a live unless a bunch of people beg me. I'm just going to take some pictures and see, post them on the site, etc. But Sunday night, Sean, Monday, Al Stevens, Tuesday, Commissioner Haney. We got a full week coming up. God bless you. God bless Indiana, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you very much.